So again, this is session 3 of the 4-part webinar series where I am giving some advice for school leaders on AI policy and literacy. And essentially, my background is all coming from being a teacher and a school leader, being a founding principal, which now I'm the co-founder at Scholar Education. And we are building a platform that is creating personalized learning for every lesson plan. I'm using my experience as a classroom teacher, classroom principal, and also being a co-founder of an AI tool to just give that actionable advice to school leaders on how to get started with creating policies in your school. A recap of why we decided to create this webinar series. Well, AI is probably the fastest adopted technology we've seen, and despite there being huge percentages of usage from students and teachers already, only 50% of the states have even provided formal guidance on how schools should start policies, and only 2 of those states actually have a law that requires them to create policies. So there's definitely a need for it. And our goal with this webinar series is just to kind of break through all the noise and give those tangible steps coming from the lens of a classroom teacher and former principal. So quick recap here. Session 1, we went over the frame approach, which I am a self-proclaimed acronym queen. I love acronyms. I always had them in my classroom, hanging everywhere. So I thought that would be a good tangible step for everybody to have acronyms to go back and to their schools and kind of discuss. So the first one that we discussed was the frame approach, which is setting the foundations. So conducting staff and student and parent surveys, understanding who's using technology or AI technology, how are they already using AI technologies, and then form an AI task force. The next part is recognizing the risks, so addressing the cheating, addressing the expectations, addressing the student privacy concerns, and then aligning your current policies to include AI as well. And then managing AI implementation. So train your staff, do pilots with schools, monitor the effectiveness, and then of course make sure that you are using AI in an ethical way. Last week, we went over a framework for K-5 using the acronym SAFE. So setting clear boundaries and defining AI's roles and its limitations within the K-5 learning atmosphere. A was age-appropriate AI literacy. So teaching simple, engaging ways of how students can start to be introduced to different AI that they are using, and having them recognize what is an AI tool, what isn't an AI tool. Family and teacher engagement, and then establishing safe and accessible AI practices. You'll see a common trend with all 4 of these webinar series, which is always going to include safety. This isn't something new, in the tech space. This is just another type of technology that we have to ensure that we're still following those laws. So recapping that, I have this document. It's located in the bit.ly right here. So bit.ly/AI in action doc. You have access to this, so you can get a little bit more detail than I'm going over in the webinars, and also links to the resources where I found, a lot of what we're talking about today and throughout the series. I shared these statistics the last 2 series as well, but I want to just circle back to the most important here, which is the last one. 71% of employers are preferring candidates who have AI skills over those who don't. So that is why when we're talking about 6 through 12 and we're having, kids who will be entering the workforce pretty shortly, that's what employers are going to be looking for. In fact, to share a personal story, I was talking to a friend who had a job interview literally today, and she was shocked that one of the questions was, are you currently using ChatGPT specifically, in your workflow and how? Because they, as an organization, are. And she was shocked that that was a question. I wasn't shocked because I knew the statistic, but it just further highlighted how important it is for us to teach AI literacy and have, policies for all grade levels, but 6 through 12 particularly important because they're entering the workforce so soon. So let's jump into it. Secondary students are going to need to be prepared to have the skills related to AI use because, like I mentioned, they're entering the workforce and very, very quickly. So they're going, employers are going to expect digital literacy, ethical AI use, and critical thinking skills. So as schools, we have to make sure that we have policies and procedures on how we can help students build all three of those. So how should AI be integrated into the 6 through 12 classroom? It is a little different than the K-5, like I mentioned last series. We want to consider things like review and reinforcing the current policies that you have. We want to clarify AI's policies in general and how when they cannot use it. And we're going to go deeper on each one of these. We want to provide AI literacy and workforce readiness skills, ethical AI use, and AI as a learning partner. So again, I'm an acronym queen. So the acronym that we're going to be breaking down today is called CLEAR. So CLEAR is a framework for my recommendations on implementing 6 through 12 policy or AI policy. C stands for clarifying AI policy and expectations. L, literacy and AI and workforce readiness. E, ethical AI use and academic integrity. A, AI as a learning partner. And then R, review and reinforce policies. I think what we often focus on, especially in the 6 through 12 space, is academic integrity and the fear around cheating. So, my recommendation to you all is definitely we're going to address that today. That's why it's the E and CLEAR. But my recommendation is to really think beyond just the academic integrity. Academic integrity concerns with EdTech tools and technology has been a concern since they were introduced to the classroom. So this isn't new, is it a new thing that we've been addressing? It's just something else we need to consider with our policies. So let's hop into C. C is clarify all policies and expectations. So define acceptable AI use for students and teachers. Middle and high school students are going to be using it, and if they're not using it in school because you're blocking it, they're going to use it at home. So schools need to provide clear and enforceable guidelines that allow students to use AI productively while preventing misuse. So the only way that they're going to do that is if we are providing them guidance on how to do that. So here my recommendation. Establish clear expectations. So I am recommending requiring an AI disclosure on assignments where AI is used. So students should, specify what AI tool they're using and how they used it when they are doing assignments. And of course, that would be an assignment that the teacher has already given approval that AI can be used on it. So being very forthcoming with your students about when it is acceptable and when it's not. For us as educators to assume that they're not going to use it or just say they can't use it, it's just going to set us up to be disappointed, to be honest, because they are going to be using it. It is a very powerful tool that everybody has access to for free, essentially. And it's not realistic for us to have the expectation that they don't ever use it. So we just have to provide the very clear expectations so that we don't put the students and ourselves in a situation where we just block it, avoid it, then we have to deal with the repercussions of it being used. So an AI disclosure would be similar to how they would cite, evidence from a source. This is just, my opinion, a new type of citation that we're going to see. And my prediction is that this is going to become the norm very, very soon, where it's a policy not only for schools, but I think in the workforce, companies are going to expect this as well. The next one is specify acceptable AI use cases. So, here's some examples of things that, I would recommend saying AI is acceptable with. But I also could even advocate for you all, if this is something you're doing in your classroom, or maybe you start this with if you're a school leader, you start this with your teachers, you have like a T-chart. What is acceptable, what is not? Have an open conversation where they're the ones that are coming up with the ideas of what should be acceptable, what. Every time I did this with my students, I was, always blown away by the fact that they came up with some things that maybe I didn't think about. And they always, came to the conclusion of the right decision, essentially, right? So they were coming up with these things on their own. So, for example, if I were in a classroom, one of the things that we would do before we would do like a project-based learning assignment or a unit is we would do a knows and needs to knows chart. And on this chart, you would do like, all right, we're about to start learning this topic, this set of standards. This is what our project's about to be on. What do you already know about this topic, and what do you need to know about this topic? And it was basically a protocol that would allow the students to have a lot of buy-in about when you were teaching, because they were telling you what they need to know in order to be successful. It's a very similar concept. Have a conversation with them about acceptable use cases. So things such as brainstorming, research guidance, summarizing things, maybe as a language assistant. Scholar Education, for example, has 179 different languages that we translate into, because, a lot of our students here in Florida don't have English as their first language. Or even getting feedback on writing and problem solving strategies. Maybe things that you prohibit are, like no-brainer things, like they can't write an entire essay or do an entire assignment without any student input, or generate false information or false citations, complete assessments or projects dishonestly. These, having probably an open conversation, if you're doing this from a school leader perspective with your staff or your task force that I recommended in the first webinar, or if you're in the classroom, having this conversation with your students very openly. So continuing with clarifying, ensure teachers are modeling responsible AI use as well. And they're the ones that are guiding. So establish teacher guidelines for using AI too. So as a school, we tend to think about, all right, we don't want the kids to cheat, and we want how do we combat that? And using AI as a workflow automation tool, and it's helping every industry become more efficient. So of course we want our teachers to use that when it makes sense. But my recommendation is that you have a policy that includes that teachers have to be transparent about when they use AI tool. If they're turning in lesson plans, perhaps you have the same thing for students, where they just disclose that they, created lesson plans with collaboration from blank AI source. And then require teachers to review all AI generated content. But I think it's a really powerful message to students that if your teachers are saying, this project idea, saying to your students, this project idea, I got help for this project idea with ChatGPT or with Scholar Education, right? Like there's nothing wrong with disclosing what we're doing, in the back end as well, as a way to model good use cases and good use and ethical use of AI. I shared this in previous webinars, but on our website at Scholar Education, there is AI Champion course, which is basically a free introduction course to AI for any teacher. It's not Scholar Education. Just wanted to give a framework for all teachers on how to get started using any AI tool. So if you're one of those teachers or a school leader looking for somewhere to get started, that could be a good place. It's at joinscholar.com. The next one in clear is L, so literacy and AI workforce readiness. So AI is being integrated into nearly every industry, and students are going to need to understand how AI is definitely going to be impacting their future career. So going a little deeper on that, introducing how AI is used in different career paths like business, healthcare, engineering, creative industries, beyond. My recommendation is not to just have like an AI course or one singular, content area that is including AI, because the reality is they're going into many different workforces that are all going to be integrating AI. So my recommendation for every school's, AI task force is to consider different ways to embed AI into the already existing flow of the school so that students can see and get exposed to different applications of AI, and having conversations across every content area about how it potentially is going to impact the workforce. Understanding that jobs, there's a fear around AI replacing jobs, which, maybe over time, we're not there yet. Maybe over time, there will be some jobs that are replaced, but my prediction is really they're gonna evolve. The jobs might look different because they're gonna have AI to help make it more efficient. And, one example that comes to mind is like a call center. There's an assumption that maybe a call center could be completely, not needed anymore because AI can automate those calls now and do everything from start to finish. And that is correct to some degree. Like, yes, it can outperform from a quantity perspective how many calls can be made. And therefore, if you're doing more calls, or receiving more calls, that's going to increase the efficiency. But there's still going to be human oversight, right? Review of those calls, quality control. There's going to be calls that maybe have to be escalated to a next step. The jobs are definitely going to be evolving because AI is impacting every industry, and having the students be very much aware of that. AI skills for jobs. So how our students can work alongside of an AI tool and develop, their AI literacy skills, but also still working on those skills that have been important and honestly been highlighted before AI was even, honestly, I think we saw with the rise of social media, the need of presentation skills like getting up and doing public speaking or collaborating in groups and critical thinking. Those were already things that schools were trying to figure out how to focus on because they were being lost with the growth of social media and honestly smartphones. Now AI is another kind of tool that can be something that's going to make those skills more important, to be honest, because there's going to be more of a need for having, the AI is not going to be able, well, I can't predict the future here. So right now, AI is not going to be collaborating, and being like a team member or doing presentations for the company, or it might be able to start doing some workforce training, like doing some onboarding and stuff, but there's still going to be a need for that human, those human skills, that empathy that humans right now are the only. Learning how AI processes data, identifies patterns, and makes predictions. That's probably the most powerful part of AI in general for every industry, is having different types of data that we've never had before, and then also just being able to quickly analyze the data and find patterns that might have been missed by the human eye. And then AI in decision making, so understanding how bias happens with AI-powered tools, like, for example, AI-powered hiring or finance or healthcare systems, if like making sure this is a great use case for that human, those human skills that are the ones that will be able to identify those bias that are potentially there. So how do we focus on those workforce skills that students are going to be expected to have? Well, digital literacy, understanding how the tools work, critical thinking, and learning to analyze AI-generated content for its accuracy and bias, being able to synthesize information. So when we do use it for research, the human being the one to, potentially look at it and then maybe develop new ideas out of it as well. This all kind of goes back to a prompt engineering, which I'm going to share another resource with you in a minute. But prompt engineering at the end of the day, right now, teaching kids how to use the tools effectively. So it's a framework of the structure of how these AI tools need to be prompted or asked questions to so that they get the right responses. And then helping students understand how AI is processing and, the data, which comes down to, how are these tools being created and who's creating them, and that's potentially, impacting its bias as well. So free resource for students as well. So we have an AI literacy course for students, giving them all the basics about how LLMs work and how prompt engineering works and everything like that. We have a free resource at joinscholar.com. Now, ethical AI use. AI is challenging traditional views on plagiarism and originality for sure. Schools are going to have to kind of redefine ethical AI use, and I'm going to give you some tangible tips of what I would do, sitting in a principalship or even a classroom teacher. So our goal is to ensure students understand the difference between AI assistance and academic dishonesty. So what we need to do is revise our school policy and include AI use exceptions. And then we want to mandate, students in detail when they cannot use AI on assignments. And then create potentially an AI acceptable use scale. So in summary, what I mean by this is imagine, I kind of look at this as like going into an elementary classroom and you see like on the wall where it's like your voice levels, like, are we at a whisper? Are we loud type of thing? Outside voice, inside voice. Think about it in a similar fashion. So create an acceptable use scale. So maybe you have a school-wide scale or a district-wide scale or a classroom-wide scale. And I have an example actually in that document where perhaps a 0 is that you're not allowed to use AI on this assignment, test, maybe it's a final essay submission, things like that. Then maybe you have examples of, maybe it goes to, here, I'm actually going to bring up my document here. So level 0 is no AI used at all. So exams, etc. 1 could be maybe AI assistance is allowed for brainstorming, organizing, or editing. And then level 2 is AI generated drafts are permitted with student edits and citations. Maybe you as a school create a scale of acceptable AI use so that it's very clear expectations on when they cannot use it. And, that way, going back to that kind of frustration moment, which I'm sure we've all been there when a kid has potentially plagiarized or cheated and maybe claimed that they didn't know they couldn't do that. And maybe they didn't because we weren't very explicit in our directions. Or maybe they did. Maybe we were explicit and they still did it. But this is going to set us up for at least dealing with those consequences and not having any gray area because it's very black and white. It's acceptable or not. I also wanted to share this. I got this from, it's AI for Education. It's a great resource for you all. But this is the guidance that they actually have as I think like a poster you could print or a flyer that you could put in your classroom, like when is it acceptable to use a chatbot and when is it not? And it's similar to that scale that I just mentioned. And it could be a jumpstart for you to have that conversation with your students or your teachers as well. So the next letter is, we're still in ethical use. So redesigning AI-resistant assignments that focus on critical thinking originality. So this is sometimes easier said than done, but it's not something that we haven't been saying. Like I said, kids have had access to cheating for a very long time. I've caught students cheating in any way you could probably imagine, anything from just like sharing pictures on Snapchat. I've had kids take a picture of a literal midterm exam and send it to everybody in the class, not just their class, but everybody in that teacher's course. So if there's a will, there's a way. So I understand it's extremely frustrating, but we've been dealing with, academic dishonesty for a while. And AI is just another tool in that dishonesty toolbox that they can use. So I've been saying these types of things for many, many years, before AI was even in existence, and it doesn't really change my perspective. At the end of the day, I've always advocated to my teachers to grade assignments that you physically see your students when you can. What I mean by that is, like, if they're in your classroom, you are able to monitor the use of a computer, or you're able to kind of manage the environment where they're writing that essay or taking that test, right? You're able to rotate the classroom, put the classroom structured in a way that that is the best for that assignment's environment. So same kind of concepts here. Require students to show their thought process when doing writing assignments. I think this really goes to that critical thinking part, and honestly is a great use case. This is a great example of an assignment you could do where kids have to show their thought process, and then maybe after they've done their own, they go and use a reasoning model, like a ChatGPT reasoning model, or a different tool that has a reasoning model where it also is showing its thought process, and then they can compare their thought process to the AI's thought process and create a comparison chart. I think that would be a great example of them understanding how AI tools work, and then also probably improving their critical thinking skills. Oral presentations and in-class work that AI can't replicate. If you are having a conversation with a student, that's not something that right away that they've done that themselves. And then I'm a big proponent of project-based learning. The high school that I founded was centered completely around project-based learning because it did apply all of those 21st century skills like critical thinking, collaboration, public speaking, those things that were missing in the workforce and what the workforce was identifying as a need in the upcoming graduates. So again, project-based learning, I actually feel like this is a great use case for teachers because project-based learning can be really overwhelming from a planning perspective. So now with a tool like AI, you can plan a project-based learning unit a lot quicker. And then now you have students who are going to have to apply knowledge to real-world problems to show that they've done the learning themselves. So the next one is A, and that's AI as a learning partner. I definitely believe in this. Help students use AI to enhance their learning, problem solving, and communication. I'm obviously very biased because we have BaxterBot, which is a on-the-spot academic tutor for students tailored to each student's learning profile. So I do feel like there's a very strong use case for this and a very strong need from a perspective of having the students feel more comfortable asking questions than they might in the classroom setting, but also taking the workload of having to balance all the needs of the students in the classroom from the teacher. So things that an AI learning partner can help students with is use AI to gather information for research. Again, this all goes back to effective prompts. So with the effective prompts and the effective use of AI, they can do things like the research, career exploration, and skill development. So we can use AI to help us with all of those things that are going to be expected for the workforce. Now, the last thing is probably the most important. Well, maybe the most important. Maybe the academic integrity was more important, but the reality is, for CLEAR, the last one is R, which is review and reinforce. And what I was about to say with the reality is things are changing very quickly. So we have to recognize that how fast AI is evolving, and we're going to have to make sure that our policies are kept up to date. So ensure that policies remain effective, ethical, and enforceable. Maybe conduct quarterly or semester AI reviews with students, teachers, and potentially partnering with an industry expert. Host AI discussions with students, debate the pros and the cons. Honestly, we were just at Scholar Education was just at a career fair last week, and we were talking about Baxterbot and just asking the students what they like and they don't like about anything. They're very brutally honest, and they always make you walk away with something you didn't think of. And I'll tell you, when I'm hearing from students about how they're using it for some of them are even telling me, I don't want to use AI because I'm scared I'm going to get in trouble. Some of them are saying, well, I get kind of frustrated because it doesn't give me the answer I want. And what that tells me is probably two things. One is they probably don't have good prompt engineering skills yet, and that's something that they need to work on. And then the other thing is that there's been a fear around getting in trouble, for AI use. And those are all things that we can work on as school leaders. And just making sure that you have a policy in place for reviewing your policies and your procedures around AI in the classroom. So just to recap, CLEAR is the framework for 6 through 12 implementation. C is clarifying policies. L, literacy and workforce readiness. E, ethical use and academic integrity. A, AI is a learning partner. And then R, reviewing and reinforcing those policies. As always, we are expanding our pilot. So if you want to learn more about Scholar Education, here is QR code to schedule a live demo, join our waitlist for next school year. Our last session is next Thursday, and that's going to be from policy to practice. So we're going to kind of move away from all the policy focused things and then focus on challenges and return on investment when implementing AI.